NASCAR tore down one of its best tracks, and for now, there's no clear replacement. For years, Auto Club Speedway was a fan favorite, a 2-mile superspeedway known for intense battles, high speeds, and some of the best racing in the sport. But today, it's gone. The plan was clear: demolish the track, build a new short track, and bring back better racing. But instead of construction crews laying fresh asphalt, Bulldozers flattened the site, and NASCAR sold off 433 acres of the land for $800 million. Now what remains is a half-demolished speedway, a growing warehouse district, and a track that may never be rebuilt. So what happened? Was this really about improving the sport, or was it just about cashing in on prime California real estate? Today, we're breaking down the shocking demolition of Auto Club Speedway, why it happened, where the money went, and whether NASCAR ever truly intended to build a new track at all. To understand why Auto Club Speedway's demolition is so controversial, we have to go back to the beginning. In the mid-1990s, NASCAR was booming, expanding into major metropolitan markets to capitalize on its growing national audience. And Southern California, one of the largest sports and entertainment hubs in the world, was a prime target. Built on the site of the former Kaiser steel mill, Auto Club Speedway was a massive engineering feat, transforming an abandoned industrial wasteland into a 2-mile, high-speed superspeedway. The man behind it? Roger Penske, the legendary motorsports mogul who envisioned a West Coast version of Michigan International Speedway. When the track opened in 1997, it wasn't just another oval, it was a statement. The facility featured a massive D-shaped 2-mile superspeedway capable of producing speeds over 200 miles per hour. With a seating capacity of over 100,000, it was one of the largest racing venues on the West Coast. The infield complex wasn't just built for racing, but was designed to host NASCAR, IndyCar, and even Hollywood productions. The entire project came at a price tag of $120 million in 1997. For years, it delivered some of the best racing moments in NASCAR history. Jimmy Johnson dominated his home track, Kyle Busch earned his first Cup Series win there, and Kevin Harvick pulled off a last-lap thriller in 2011. In its later years, the track's worn-out surface became an unexpected strength, creating multi-groove racing that many considered among the best in the sport. But despite its legacy, Auto Club Speedway wasn't immune to NASCAR's shifting priorities. By the late 2010s, large intermediate tracks were losing favor, and short tracks were rising in popularity. NASCAR had already been scaling back at some of its larger venues, and Auto Club's aging asphalt and declining attendance made it a prime target for change. So, in 2020, NASCAR made a shocking announcement: the beloved 2-mile superspeedway would be demolished and replaced by a high-banked, half-mile short track. The goal was simple: bring tighter racing, more action, and a Bristol-style feel to the West Coast. But what started as an ambitious plan quickly unraveled into one of NASCAR's biggest controversies. When NASCAR announced the transformation of Auto Club Speedway, it framed the decision as a move to modernize its track portfolio. The sport was shifting towards shorter tracks and closer racing, and replacing the 2-mile oval with a half-mile short track was supposed to be part of that strategy. NASCAR's official explanation was clear: the sale of the surrounding land would help fund the short track conversion, reinvest in fan experiences, and pay down debt from its acquisition of International Speedway Corporation, ISC, in 2019. On the surface, it seemed like a strategic shift, one that would bring more exciting racing to the West Coast. But many fans and industry insiders never fully bought into this reasoning. For years, Auto Club Speedway had become one of the best tracks in NASCAR. The rough, worn-out asphalt had transformed it into a multi-groove racing paradise, forcing drivers to manage the tire wear, adapt their lines, and rely on strategy. The last few races there were widely considered some of the best intermediate track races in the sport. The idea of tearing it down for a short track raised eyebrows immediately. But then came the real shock. NASCAR sold most of the land before any short track was even built. In 2023, NASCAR sold 433 acres of the Speedway's 522-acre site, generating $559 million, with total considerations exceeding $800 million. The organization kept just 90 acres, barely enough for a short track, with no additional space for grandstand expansions or large-scale amenities. If the plan was always to build a new short track, why sell off so much land? While NASCAR claimed the sale was meant to fund reinvestments, many saw a different motivation. This wasn't just about building a new track, it was about cashing in on a massive real estate deal in one of the country's most valuable markets. Southern California's real estate prices have soared in recent years, and Fontana, just outside Los Angeles, was no exception. A $500 million payday was hard to ignore, but the biggest concern wasn't just the sale itself, it was what happened after the money changed hands. More than a year after the land sale, no short track has been built. Instead, the site sits empty and fans are starting to suspect that the short track may never happen at all. So was this really about improving racing, or was it just a massive financial deal that left NASCAR fans in the dust? That brings us to the demolition itself and what's actually being built in its place. In October 2023, the demolition of Auto Club Speedway officially began, marking the end of an era for one of NASCAR's most beloved tracks. The process, however, has been far from swift. Months later, parts of the grandstands, the pit lane, and some of the infield structures are still standing, while other sections of the track have been completely erased. For fans expecting construction on a new short track, the scene is bizarre. The racing surface abruptly ends before what used to be Turn 1, and instead of progress on a half-mile oval, the site has been overtaken by industrial development. Demolishing a 522-acre facility is no small feat. The process started with removing the track's surface, breaking apart the miles of asphalt, concrete barriers, and grandstand infrastructure. At the peak of demolition, entire sections of the infield and garages were dismantled, leaving behind an open, dusty lot where drivers once battled at 200 miles per hour. However, the process has not been complete. The main grandstand, front stretch, scoring pylon, and some infield garages still stand, creating an eerie sight for those familiar with the track's former glory. What's more unusual, though, is the partial demolition. If NASCAR was fully committed to a short-track rebuild, why does so much of the facility remain untouched? Some insiders speculate that the remaining structures are still standing simply because NASCAR doesn't want to pay to tear them down without a firm plan for the site. However, it's worth noting that the demolition progress appears to match what was shown in the original plans for the short track. Several observers have pointed out that the land where the short track is supposed to be built remains untouched by warehouse development. That suggests NASCAR hasn't completely abandoned the project, but without concrete action, skepticism remains high. Instead of the promised short track, the land surrounding the speedway has been repurposed for commercial real estate. NASCAR sold 433 acres of the site to developers, and what's being built isn't a racing venue, it's a warehouse complex spanning 6.6 million square feet. The contrast is hard to ignore. A track that once hosted some of the fastest, most strategic races in NASCAR has been replaced by logistics centers and industrial buildings. The edge of one warehouse now sits almost exactly where Section 93 used to be, marking a dramatic shift from roaring engines to corporate distribution hubs. NASCAR officials have consistently maintained that they still intend to build a half-mile short track on the land they retained, though they admit there's no firm timeline for construction. NASCAR's West Region President Dave Allen recently stated, "That's option number one. We still retain enough land to build a half-mile oval if we choose to do that, but we still need some time to sort some things out and figure out if that's the right thing to do." That statement has done little to ease skepticism. If the short track was truly a priority, why has there been zero visible progress? Economic factors have also been cited as complications affecting the timeline. Inflation, rising capital costs, and the high cost of construction in California have made the project increasingly difficult to justify financially. NASCAR may still want to build the track, but the question remains, can they afford to? The fact that warehouses are being built faster than a racetrack raises a troubling possibility. Was this ever about racing, or was it always about a land sale? For now, Auto Club Speedway's future remains uncertain. With no NASCAR race scheduled for Southern California in 2025, the sport has effectively vacated one of its biggest markets, and the fate of the promised short track remains in limbo. Auto Club Speedway isn't the only racetrack to disappear. Over the past decade, Rockingham, Chicagoland, and North Wilkesboro have all faced a similar fate, either abandoned, downsized, or repurposed. Chicagoland Speedway, once a staple of the NASCAR calendar, has sat dormant since 2020, its massive grandstands gathering dust. Rockingham, a track that once hosted some of the most competitive races in NASCAR history, fell into disrepair before making a brief comeback attempt. North Wilkesboro nearly met the same fate until an unexpected revival brought it back to life in 2023. This trend isn't exclusive to NASCAR. Across the country, massive sports venues are being torn down, redeveloped, or left in limbo. Where stadiums and racetracks once stood, developers are moving in, replacing them with warehouses, office parks, and commercial spaces. Why? Because in today's economy, massive stadiums and superspeedways aren't as financially sustainable as they once were. As costs rise and as sports leagues shift focus to TV deals, streaming, and alternative venues, the traditional megasports complex is starting to look more like a relic of the past than the future. For years, NASCAR's identity was tied to big, high-speed, multi-groove racetracks. But now, NASCAR's shift away from large, traditional venues signals something bigger. Short tracks and street circuits are becoming more common, while older, larger venues are either being downsized or abandoned. The loss of Auto Club Speedway might just be the latest symptom of a sport that is changing at its core. For now, all we can do is wait. But with no NASCAR race in Southern California in 2025, no visible signs of track construction, and warehouses rising where Turn 1 used to be, it's hard to see how this ends well. So what do you think? Was this all about racing, or was it something else? Please let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like and subscribe for more Mega Build stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.